and in the story as you hear it. Thanks, Dakhil.
Yes, thank you everybody for being here. This is an honor and a pleasure, and I'm really excited. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Dakhil Hasif, and I'm a griot. In the West African tradition, a griot is a storyteller, and that's what I get to do professionally, right? I get to make TV commercials. I'm a filmmaker, and I also do voiceover work. I write, I direct. I get to really pour my heart out as an artist. And more recently, I've been using storytelling to help men on their own healing journeys through my organization, Men at Work Healing. So I have many stories to tell, but there's one story that hasn't always been easy to tell, and that's the story of my family. So this is a picture from the day my son was born. I was almost 26 years old, and if you listened to me, I would have sounded like a person who seemed to have it all really figured out. But as time passed, my family changed and my understanding of family evolved, right? Family comes in different forms. We go through ups and downs, yet we find ways to stay connected. I'm communal and family oriented, but inside my home, something wasn't quite clicking. Why couldn't we find the right balance? And so here is my family today, right? That young man turned 23 years old and he's stepping into his adult life out west as a professional dancer. But back east, his recently divorced father is co-parenting his little sisters with the help of his partner and still striving for that connected, harmonious family unit. In order to get there, I had to reflect on some key pain points, right? Even when we were in a good place, there's always like this hesitation to start fresh. And one of the biggest challenges was always centered around how do we share decision making equitably and practically, right? Who handles the responsibilities? Why do leftovers go on the bottom shelf instead of the top shelf? Whose job is it to take out the trash? Specifically, how do we hold each other accountable without overwhelming emotions or poor communication? How do we express concerns without frustration and still feeling heard? And ultimately, how do we stay emotionally connected, creating a safe space for expression? Yes, love is the glue, but it's not enough to hold a family together, right? It takes more. And so today I want to tell you a story that's a little different about my family. One where we courageously stepped into using sociocracy to help change the structure of our family story, remix our characters a bit, and achieve the ultimate aim of harmony. Because of the nature of this gathering, I'm going to make assumptions that many of us really understand sociocracy and its function. So this is really dope that we get a chance to maybe talk more or less about the function and more about the foundation, right? So when I first learned sociocracy, it instantly made sense to me because it reflected the values that already existed in my community, right? Sharing power, being seen, and creating spaces where everyone could contribute at their best in their own talents. When I decided to learn sociocracy more formally in Academy 1 and then Academy 2, I wasn't interested in just memorizing systems or rules or bringing yet another system to my community. Instead, I was committed to living sociocratically in practice, wherever or however it made sense. And then in the middle of my training program, I saw the opportunity. One night, I asked my oldest daughter to set the table for dinner, and as soon as she started, her younger sister jumped in, barking out orders from across the room. Put my fork on that side. I don't want to sit there. Put me over here. It's like it was ridiculous. So I stopped and I said, wait a second. The person doing the work should be the one making the decision. So I told my oldest, Aya, you get to design the table however you want. And just like that, everything shifted. She lit up with excitement because she's really fancy, right? The next day, her sister wanted to take a turn. And then they both started adding their own touches, the fancy napkins, one make sure the drinks are perfectly even, right? Like dinner became more than a routine. It just became a time of creativity, collaboration, self-discovery, and even discovery for us parents to see, what is going on in the house and how our children are growing and thriving. And then the very next day in my training program, a group of us decided to take on the journey of figuring out how to introduce sociocracy into our own households. So I would like you to take note that we did not get started in a meeting room. We got started at our dinner table, right? Sitting there in the kitchen. We didn't have a formal meeting about consent and then decide. Instead, we moved at the pace and order that made sense with consent as a guideline. So these sociocratic tools aren't just for organizations, they're for life. And for overwhelming parents, it's a game changer. It lightens the load, brings more ease, and opens up space for real connection. And a key theme that I hope we can track as myself, Teal, or Tony share our stories today is the ability to use sociocratic tools when needed, not as a matter of process. So for my family, sociocracy has some real outcomes. It helps us avoid fights over small things like food choices or who's going to wash the dishes. It also allowed my partner and I to fairly distribute our responsibilities. And most notably, I remember a time when my son came home from college. He walked in, he took one look at this chart we had on the wall, and he said, "Oh, that's what's up. I see what I can do this week. Yeah, I can, mow the lawn or do the dishes this night." Like he immediately found a way to contribute without me having to assign this task to him or tell him what to do. And that's when I knew we were really onto something. So, sociocracy attracts people looking for different ways of doing things differently, wanting relief, people willing to share control, or eager to empower young people, younger voices. So in our family, we have two circles, right? We have a household care circle, which manages maintenance, chores, and responsibilities, and a fun and connection circle, which deals with planning social time, vacations, and bonding activities. Each circle still has the aim and a domain, right? For example, the household care ensures the house runs smoothly, while fun and connection focuses on the things that keep us strong and keep us bonded. Domains define what that circle can do and decide without needing broader family input. Household care might decide on the necessary repairs, while fun and connections might choose the movie night or vacations, ideas and options. And then when we're dealing with roles in sociocratic organizations, role selections allow people to nominate themselves or others based on their skills or contributions. But isn't this the same in a family? Yet, so often we overlook our own children's talents and voices. What if instead of just assigning tasks, we treated our children as partners in decision making according to their ability? Bringing sociocracy into our home changed how we showed up, not just as parents, but also as individuals, because it gave us space to learn about ourselves and each other in ways that we never really expected. So, I know it's come up already today, but the question is, why wouldn't we apply these same principles at home? Well, one concern is that it just seems really scary to finally answer some of those big questions like who does what, right? My partner and I, we lean into our strengths. I naturally excel at structures and systems, while she's great at creating moments of connection. So if she suggests we should have dinner in the backyard rather than resisting, I recognize her role in fostering connection. She chose fun connection. I took on household care. And then when we brought it up to our daughters, without even asking what they wanted to do, one oldest daughter was like, "Hey, I've been noticing things need fixing around here for a while. I have a list." Right. And then the other jumped in and was like, "Oh, great, because I want to plan a trip to Coney Island." And they naturally fell into roles without anybody having to force it. And it was a really beautiful thing. So, yes, rounds and feedback, they still exist in your family too. And if you ever use sociocracy in an organization, you know the power of the rounds. They're a really great way to create feedback, objections, and get deeper understanding. So I think these, tools are really useful in my family for creating harmony in our household. Specifically, the fact that, rounds shift the dynamic. Parents talk less, kids get to talk more, children feel generally heard. And then we get the power of understanding that, in the round, when you get a turn to speak, you don't have to fight for the space later. And children are no different. They need that reassurance that they will be heard, that they will have a turn, that their voices matter, and that they belong. And so I knew that this was clicking in our house after one family meeting. My daughter suddenly said, "I want to make a proposal," the younger one. She said that she was tired of her older sister's friends saying, "Hi, little sister," to her in the hallway instead of using her name. And as soon as Big Sister jumped in to give her opinion, she stopped and said, "You'll get a turn, but first I want to know if there are any clarifying questions." And like I was stunned because I'm like, wow, she was not just venting, but she was using sociocratic tools to make sure she would be understood. She ran a full round, first clarifying questions, then a feedback round, and finally we worked towards some possible solutions. And that's when I knew that sociocracy, wasn't just that my children realized that the rounds weren't just about meeting. They understood that this was a resource and a way for them to navigate the world and navigate this family. And if it works in an organization, it absolutely will work in your family. And feedback has the same effect, rounds deepen listening. So when I asked our daughters, what needed to be done around the house, my oldest daughter was like, "Hey, this refrigerator needs to get cleaned." She's eye level, she's closer, she can see it, she's looking at it every day. I'm not paying attention, right? But now this was a valuable information, and she could give feedback to it and was like, "Hey, I want to get involved in it." So by listening to each other, we saw that each of us could really contribute and reduce friction. When everyone knows they'll get a turn to speak, there's less, of a fight for space in these conversations. And so, yeah, sociocracy has some really dynamic takeaways for my family and I. We had better communication. The structure of spaces that we created really allowed us to have more difficult conversations in a better way. We had regular meetings. We set a time aside to prioritize each other. When we didn't set up time for an adult circle meeting, we missed it. When we put it on the calendar, it happens, just like in your work life. We prioritize what's important to us. So why wouldn't we make that happen in our families? Shared accountability. Responsibilities were clear, and this reduced resentment, which then gave way for celebrations of our contributions. In our adult circle meeting, my partner and I, our check-in is we get to do 2 minutes on how we appreciate how the other person showed up in the house that week, because it's important to be acknowledged. And also empowered children. Our children are, they're practicing facilitation, they're facilitating icebreakers, and they're bringing ideas to the table that they want to see happen around the house. So, one last story. Back in Brooklyn, my girls begged me for years to let them paint their room. I always shut it down because I didn't want to do that much work, right? Recently divorced, I'm not dealing with all this. I got enough. But after we've been using sociocracy for a while, they got wise, formed their own children's circle, organized themselves, made a proposal, and came up with a plan. They'd help pick out the paint, learn how to properly set up the room, and actually contribute to the painting process. They were fully invested. And in the end, they got their room painted pink without me doing all the work. And it became a family effort. They learned real skills. And honestly, they did a great job for just being 7 and 9 years old. And so we fast forward to now. My family dynamic has shifted. My son is out in LA. My partner and I moved upstate New York, and downstairs is my 73-year-old aunt. And I'm back in Brooklyn about every week, and my daughters come up on the weekends. So once again, life has shifted in unexpected ways, but we're still using our sociocratic tools to make decisions and get things done, not through rigid structures or formal training, just by integrating the tools into everyday life. It's not about making things more complicated. It's about making life work better together. With that, I'm complete. And I'll turn it back over to you, Tony.
Thank you so much. I want to give y'all a minute to just reflect on what